thoughts for you?
No, thanks so much for having me. It's always fun to be here, so thank you.
That was fun. Thank you.
You have to tell people again the reference to the socks. Where was your job originally? I love this about you. You work for SeaWorld, right?
I taught education programs at SeaWorld for a long time. So, yeah. So big
From
love
SeaWorld
for whales
to
and
politics,
dolphins.
it makes all kinds of sense.
Well, why not?
Absolutely, no doubt. All right, good stuff. We are back here at noon Eastern tomorrow. Now, here's Harris.
Fox News Alert deadline day and the closely watched Florida recount. I'm Harris Faulkner. This is Outnumbered Overtime. Just 2 hours from now, election officials in Florida must report their recount findings in the state's Senate and gubernatorial races. Democrat-heavy Palm Beach County says it's unlikely, highly unlikely, they will meet that deadline. But a federal judge could approve an extension there. And at the Broward County Elections Board, led by the controversial supervisor Brenda Snipes, they're saying that they will finish in time, despite some earlier glitches and delays. This as President Trump is calling on Broward's elections chief to be fired. Phil Keating is joining us now live from Palm Beach County Board of Elections. Good to see you, Phil.
Good to see you as well, hear you at least, Harris. It is all but certain, as you mentioned, that Palm Beach County is not going to make this 3 p.m. recount deadline. The warehouse here where I'm standing, which is where all the recounting began on Saturday night, is for the most part empty. There are a couple of workers over there. They are processing some ballots. A few elections workers are gathered around, but the elections chief had hoped to at least get through the Senate race recount, but that was still uncertain as of this morning. Yesterday, the day before this critical deadline, our photographer was inside this room all day long. Empty room, no people, no recounting, despite the pressure. The election supervisor a couple of hours ago explained it like this.
Well, you know what? When you work about 45 hours in a row, you got to let the people sleep. I need my expert team because this is a very technical process. I can't have just anybody running this.
Just to the south of us, beleaguered Broward County made up a lot of lost time, rushing through all the absentee, provisional, and day of ballots, and just after midnight finished its recount to celebration inside. Governor Scott, about 45 minutes ago, tweeting this: with over 2/3 of the machine recount completed, our margin of victory has grown. It's time for Senator Bill Nelson to end this recount. Up in Tallahassee, the federal judge handling numerous lawsuits by the campaigns and others worked through the night, even sleeping in his office. There are more motions being argued in that courtroom this hour. Now, much of it is focusing on the super close Senate race between Republican Governor Scott and incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson. Scott leads Nelson by 12,000 votes out of 8 million cast. The judge ruled in favor of Nelson this morning on the ballot signature issue. That affects about 5,000 Florida voters whose ballot signatures did not perfectly match the signatures on file. The judge giving those 5,000 people until Saturday to resolve those signature issues and get their vote counted or not. Several counties are still counting right now, recounting at the hour. Duval County, that's around Jacksonville, Brevard County, Space Coast, Hillsborough County, that's Tampa area, and of course Palm Beach County. All of these counties do expect to finish their recounts by 2 o'clock, definitely by 3 o'clock, and get them all done. Palm Beach County, of course, not going to happen. There.
Phil Keating, thank you very much. For more, let's get some insight from a recount veteran. Alex Vogel served as counsel for the Bush-Cheney campaign during the year 2000 presidential recount. Boy, I guess you could say it's deja vu all over again, but I've heard people in your shoes say, no, this one's different and potentially bad news moving forward. Would you agree?
So I do think it's different in some troubling ways. The most significant to me is the issue that what's really happening in these lawsuits filed by the Democrats is they're actually going after some of the core underlying anti-fraud pieces of Florida election law, like the signature match. I would argue this at this point is not really about Florida. With a 12,000 vote margin, the machine count is going to be very similar, if not exactly the same. And Harris, what I think you're really seeing is an effort to not only impact this race, but more importantly for the Democrats is to reset the legal playing field for 2020.
You know, as we look at this, most counties will meet today's deadline. I'm curious, Why can some get it done and a couple can't?
There's a couple of issues going on here. One, some of the counties are just simply larger and have much larger vote tallies. That's understandable. The other reality is Florida, in this election, as we've seen, has had some counties who have trouble with election administration. That's an issue that's going to need to be looked at after this because, as you rightly point out, most of these counties have been able to do all of this pretty easily.
Well, 65 out of 67, right?
That's pretty good numbers.
Yeah. Talk to me, if you will, about what can get called in terms of these races very quickly, maybe even by today. Anything?
So a couple of things are going to happen. We'll get to the deadline. If the counties all meet the deadline, then the state will assess whether or not they are within the hand recount. If a race at that point is outside the hand recount, it's actually for the media to make the decision as to what they can call, like the governor's race. And then at that point, the state will certify the elections on the 20th, and it will all be done. In the Senate race, if the margin after this hand count stays below, after this machine count stays below the hand count threshold, the hand count will go on. There's a 3-day window on that. But the truth is, at that point, it's really a political decision for Senator Nelson as to how he wants to play this out for his own legacy, because the truth is that hand count only looks at overvotes and undervotes, and there's really not a legitimate scenario where that's enough to change the outcome.
Real quickly, let me just remind everybody what we're talking about in terms of the over-under vote. So the overvote is when a machine counts it more than once. The under is that yours just simply didn't get counted by the machine. And so what you're trying to do is fix something that was broken. But I don't know that that's necessarily what they're trying to do here. They're just recounting. And votes have been found in different places. In your experience and your general counsel experience legally, what legal grounds do you stand on if things are kind of coming out of the woodworks?
So the issue here is look, it's one thing to argue about fundamental flaws in the election administration. Something was done wrong, ballots weren't sent, the law was not followed. That's not really what's happening here. Instead, what's happening is people going to court on behalf of the Democrats. Interesting to note that Senator Nelson is not even a party to a lot of these lawsuits, which probably tells you something politically, and arguing that they want to change the underlying Florida rules for purposes of this recount. That's a fine conversation to have before an election during a legislative session. That's not really an acceptable way to do this when you're trying to resolve an election. You had a set of laws and rules. You need to follow them, and you can revisit it after the fact.
So moving forward, and that's what I said in terms of this might even be, I don't know, you don't want to say worse than 2000, but have some bad implications. How do you deal with the administrative portion of this? Because there are politics in play everywhere.
So the answer to that is after the election, both in terms of personalities and processes, meaning the people involved, it is totally legitimate for the next administration in Florida and for the voters of Florida, the state legislature, to look at those issues, remove people who may not have performed adequately or professionally, and if there are rules that need to be changed, that can be done. But that's the time to do it, not in the middle of an election.
Real quickly, yesterday I had on the program Brad Todd, the senior advisor to Rick Scott. He said that there's still 12 to 13,000 votes apart at this point, and you're only picking up a few hundred as you go away. Is that pretty normal? Just real quickly to get your point of view on it.
The answer is a margin of 12,000 plus votes is well outside what would be considered normal for any recount to change results. I've done this for a long time. In modern political history, there's never been a recount where more than a few hundred, I think maybe 500, actually changed. And especially with the machine recount, machines are actually really good, Harris, at counting. And so I think the numbers are going to be remarkably similar.
Oh, Alex, that was funny. Yes, they are, aren't they? Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just more than a week after the midterm elections, we now know who will be leading the Republican Party in the next Congress. On the Senate, Mitch McConnell was reelected as majority leader. And in the House, Kevin McCarthy becoming the minority leader, leading the Republicans there, with Nancy Pelosi expected to be House Speaker when Democrats vote after Thanksgiving. McCarthy described his goals for Republicans in the House.
Our number one goal is to get America continuing moving forward. We serve in a divided government and a divided country. Our goal is to unite us back together again. Our second goal will be make sure we win the majority back.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. Mike?
Harris, good afternoon. Nancy Pelosi insists if the vote for Speaker were held today, she would have the votes. But Fox News has confirmed at least 17 Democrats have signed on to a letter saying they will oppose Pelosi for Speaker. Some are newly elected, others were just reelected, and they're looking for more Democrats to sign that letter. One of the lawmakers on that list explained the need for change.
The American people sent a very strong message in the election last week that we want new approaches to politics and new leaders in Washington. Just look at the incredible number of women, of veterans, of people of color who were elected. And if our party responds by reinstalling the same status quo leadership we've had since 2006.
Those who know Pelosi best say don't bet against her. Today, she noted 14 of the 17 Democrats saying they're opposed to her are men, hinting at sexism.
I enjoy a tremendous amount of support from the women in our caucus, from the new members who are women in our caucus. And so I get the upside, I think, of being a woman. You'd have to ask them. If, in fact, there is any misogyny involved in it, it's their problem, not mine.
The House GOP leadership going forward will be led by Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, and newcomer Liz Cheney of Wyoming.
We have such huge momentum with the Trump economy, with the jobs we've seen, with the improvements we've seen to our national security. We absolutely cannot let the Democrats in the House stop that momentum and turn us around. So we're going to fight every day to get our majority back.
Senate Republican leadership will be Mitch McConnell as Majority Leader, John Thune as Whip, John Barrasso of Wyoming, Roy Blunt of Missouri, and newcomer Joni Ernst of Iowa. And New York's Chuck Schumer will be back leading Senate Democrats. Harris?
Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. I want to bring in now Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. She was elected vice chair of the Senate Republican Conference, the first woman tapped for a Senate GOP leadership position since 2010. Congratulations. Great to see you. And thank you for being with me. I want to start off with the basics now that we can see that you'll hone in on. So what will you do to push forward the president's agenda?
Well, first, I am honored to serve Iowa on the leadership team. But as far as the entire conference, making sure that we are supporting the great messaging that we need to in the Republican Party, because we have had so many accomplishments in the Trump administration. So we want to push forward a message of a strong economy, rebuilding of our military. Of course, that's very important to me as a veteran, and all of the wonderful things that we will be able to accomplish moving forward, whether that be through balancing our budget, whether it's an infrastructure bill, whatever that might be. We need to push it forward and make sure we're connecting with our American constituents.
You know, on the Hill, there has been a lot of strife in the Senate.
Yes.
The civility has kind of hit the floor. How will it be different in January? I mean, you retain the majority as Republicans. You actually grow it a bit, and now you are part of the leadership.
Well, certainly we do have challenges, and as we see the House flip with a Democratic majority, things may seem impossible on the outside, but I would say that we do work in a very bipartisan manner on a number of issues that really do matter to the American people. We will need to work very heavily on President Trump's agenda, though. That will be a difficult hurdle to get over, but we will continue to work with our Democratic colleagues as best we can to make sure that we are getting our agenda done. But being on that leadership team, it will provide an additional opportunity for our outside voices to be brought directly to the leader. I was not encouraged by leadership to run for this position. I was encouraged by my colleagues to run for it. So I think we'll have a greater opportunity at voices speaking up in those leadership committee meetings.
You know, with the few times that I have had the privilege of interviewing you, I know you don't mince your words. So what do you mean by that you were chosen by your colleagues and not the leadership?
Well, certainly we have diverging opinion amongst our members. And so I think it's important to take all of those members' voices to leadership so that we are representing the greater majority of our conference. So I'm excited about that opportunity.
All right. Well, since we kind of have segued into a zone now, what was it like running for this position? I think that there are always questions of why women haven't risen a little bit faster. It's been an 8-year deficit for GOP leadership for women in the Senate.
Well, certainly I would love to see more women serving in the Senate, which means maybe we would have more women running for leadership opportunities. But we need quality individuals as well, and we need folks encouraged to step up and represent. So I was excited about the opportunity to seek election, and really am looking forward again to not only representing the conference, but also taking Iowa's voice into the leadership team. I think we need some of that Iowa common sense, and just really am humbled by the vote that was taken by my colleagues to support me in the endeavor.
Senator Ernst, I did write down one point that you said. You said President Trump, it might be difficult, a hurdle to get over with your colleagues across the aisle. Maybe one or two things that you see will be perhaps battleground.
Well, I think if we just take a look at the landscape right now, President Trump, one of his priorities, of course, is to secure our borders. And that will be a large hurdle. If we haven't been able to achieve that yet, holding both the House and the Senate, I see this as a very big obstacle. If we move into our January time session, making sure that our individual tax cuts are made permanent, that would also be a very difficult hurdle now once we have a majority of Democrats in the House. So I could go on and on and on. President Trump has done a wonderful job representing the American people and following through on his promises. And we need to keep pushing that agenda for the president, and it will be more difficult with the House now.
Senator Joni Ernst, congratulations on your GOP conference position now. Thank you for
thank
being
you,
with
Harris.
me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This weekend, you want to keep it on Fox. Chris Wallace has an exclusive interview with the President of the United States. Check your local listings when Fox News Sunday airs on Big Fox in your area, or catch it right here on the Fox News channel. FNC for the Cool Kids, Sunday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern. At least 56 people now confirmed dead. Nearly 300 people are missing, unaccounted for, in the Northern California Camp Fire. Now the process is underway to find human remains in the charred wreckage. And 500 miles away in Southern California, officials are touring another deadly disaster zone caused by fire. We'll go there live next for the latest. The death toll in California has risen again to 59 people now as two massive wildfires are hitting the state. At this hour, Governor Jerry Brown and Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke are surveying fire damage in Southern California. That's the Woolsey fire, now blamed for the deaths of at least 3 people among those 59. And yesterday, Brown and Zinke were up in northern Butte County, where the other 56 people have been now found dead, and many more are still missing. Jeff Paul is live for us in Malibu with more on both disasters. Jeff?
Yeah, Harris, it's really hard to put the devastation into words until you see it up close and just see what has happened to some of these neighborhoods. We're at a neighborhood here in Malibu where this home, as you see over here, has pretty much been burned to the ground, as well as several others in the neighborhood. This was likely this homeowner's garage. You can see the garage door here, and then as you walk over here, it looks like a Camaro that's been burned pretty much down to the metal. Some of the glass melted, and then over here, this was a boat. The fiberglass obviously doesn't do too well in the fire. You can see the motor over here, but this is just some of the damages up north at the campfire, about 80 miles north of Sacramento. The damages more far wide-ranging and much worse. Officials up there say more than 140,000 acres have burned. 56 people have died in that fire alone, and that number could rise as there is more than 200 people that remain unaccounted for. Some of the evacuees who made it out, they have lost everything right now, say that their future looks uncertain.
Well, I'm at Walmart parking lot. I'm in this tent right here, and went from owning a house to living in a tent. This is a big tragedy, you know. It feels like a bus hit me over, you know. Me personally, I lost my son in February 8th, and now I just lost this. And so it feels like I'm numb.
Now, further south here in Los Angeles County and over in Ventura County, this is what we're seeing a lot of today. The crews out in neighborhoods trying to make things safe. I spoke with a firefighter earlier, and he said for the next couple of weeks, they're going to be going into some of these hard-hit neighborhoods to make sure that everything is safe. So when those people are eventually allowed back into their homes, that they do it in a safe manner. Harris.
I know I saw pictures taken from a lifeguard tower miles away on the beach from where you are in Malibu. Unbelievable. Great to see that they are at least getting some clearer air where you're standing. Thank you. President Trump has renewed his criticism of the Mueller investigation one day after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked a bipartisan bill to protect that Russia probe. The president tweeted, quote, "Universities will someday study what highly conflicted and not Senate-approved Bob Mueller and his gang of Democrat thugs have done to destroy people. Why is he protecting crooked Hillary, Comey, McCabe, Lisa Page, and her lover, Peter S., and all of his friends on the other side?" But now a co-sponsor of the Mueller bill, GOP Senator Jeff Flake, says he will block any judicial nominations until the bill to protect the Mueller probe gets a vote. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge in D.C. with more. Catherine?
Well, thanks, Harris. This morning, the tweets also leveled allegations of intimidation, with the president calling the special counsel investigation, quote, "a total mess." It reads in part, "They are screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with the answers they want. They are a disgrace to our nation and don't care how many lives they ruin. A total witch hunt like no other in American history." Meantime, the outgoing chairman of the House Judiciary Committee telling Fox News the FBI investigation into the Trump campaign and alleged coordination with Russia actually began earlier than previously acknowledged.
I think it began in the spring. Exact dates are still of interest to us, but in the spring of 2016, before Donald Trump was even the presidential nominee of the Republican Party. What tells me that is activities that were taking place based upon interviews of witnesses.
Also on Capitol Hill, outgoing Republican Senator Jeff Flake is threatening to oppose the president's judicial nominees until legislation protecting the Russia special counsel is brought to the full Senate for a vote. This morning on Fox, a senior Senate Republican dismissed it as an empty threat.
Installation of an acting attorney general who has not been subject to confirmation by this body. The president now has this investigation in his sights, and we all know it.
With regard to Senator Flake, we are going to fulfill our constitutional responsibility, confirming judges, confirming members of the president's team. We're going to do that with or without Jeff Flake.
Special counsel does not routinely comment on tweets or other media reporting. Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much. I want to bring in my next guest now, Fred Tisi, former federal prosecutor. Fred, good to see you. This story has changed in a number of ways. Just real quickly, I want to kind of catch us up and where we are. I know you've said that it is ridiculous that a U.S. senator can make a statement that how much an investigation can be a cause of controversy is beyond that person. Why do you say that?
Well, because it boggles my mind. There's been substantial evidence, whether you agree with it or not, that calls into the question the validity of everything that was done to establish the special counsel. And there are substantial questions as to whether or not the special counsel has exceeded its authority. And for a sitting U.S. senator to just say, "Oh, no, there's no controversy whatsoever," just ignores and basically disenfranchises anybody who thinks differently. And to pass a law that basically says, guess what? We're not going to legitimize or listen to any efforts to investigate whether or not the special counsel investigation is legitimate and whether it's being done properly, which I think is very dangerous.
Why do you think it's troubling the way that Senator Jeff Flake is handling this? You've said that.
Well, what's troubling... Well, I did, and I stand by that. What's troubling to me is that a U.S. senator wants to pass a vote that's going to, quote unquote, protect the investigation. Now, if his position is that we're going to protect it from being kind of disbanded for no good reason, then I can understand where he's coming from. But the problem that I have with it and the way it's been presented and the other Democratic senators that are joining in, it's this message that is so pervasive in Washington, D.C. that there is no other side to the story. There cannot be any controversy whatsoever that the Mueller investigation was not legitimate to begin with, that the FISA warrant wasn't properly obtained, that the affidavit didn't contain facts, that the fact that the DNC and the Hillary campaign helped pay for it, that's all. There's nothing here, nothing to look at. Don't worry about it. There's no controversy. And I'm sorry, there is legitimate controversy. And so from that perspective, to pass a law that basically says we're not going to bother looking at it, nothing to see here.
Do you have the same legal concern that others are expressing, like Senator Jeff Flake, that with the recent moves that the president has made to ask for the resignation of Jeff Sessions and, the person that he appointed into the temporary position, Matthew Whitaker, do you have the same concern that we're going down in a certain road? I mean, the critics of the president, that's what they're saying, like they can forecast what's going to happen next.
Right, because you know what, Harris, I've told juries this. Our perception of how people are dealing with us is predicated on how they know they would deal with us. Okay, so for Democrats to say that they're worried about what the president's going to do, that's because I know that that's what they would do to protect themselves. In this case, I expect Whitaker, the acting attorney general, to follow DOJ guidelines which say that the special investigation cannot be disbanded without good cause. And that's the law. And I expect him and the president of the United States to deal with it in accordance with the law. And I have no reason to believe that they won't.
Fred Tisi, former federal prosecutor, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hundreds of additional members of the migrant caravan now have reached their destination. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo meeting in Houston, Texas with his incoming Mexican counterpart earlier today. Hundreds of migrants now from the caravan arrived in Tijuana yesterday, following nearly 400 who arrived on Tuesday. So they are arriving, obviously. The bulk of the caravan is still far off, thousands of people. But this has been moving faster as migrants apparently are getting rides on trucks and buses along the way. William Lajeunesse joins me now live from Tijuana, Mexico. So some had doubted that this would happen this soon, and they are arriving.
Yeah, Harris, remember when they were doing like 20 miles a day? Now they're doing 500. I mean, literally, they started streaming here into Tijuana basically about 48 hours ago. And this, of course, is their destination. You can see several hundred migrants have arrived here. But their goal, of course, is where? The United States. And if we look down here, you can see some contractors welding some concertina or razor wire on the top of that fence. So the question is, how are they going to try to enter the United States? Through the front door, asking for asylum? Well, that's going to be a minimum of 6 weeks because there's already 2,500 people in line for asylum going through the front door or the back. We already know that last night, the Border Patrol tells me about 12 people were arrested, some at the beach that you're looking at right now, and also some east in the mountains, east of Otay Mesa in San Diego. It didn't take them very long to find some of the more vulnerable spots. Now, the U.S. approach all along has been, listen, we're going to apprehend you, we're going to arrest you, we're going to deport you. And we've got the resources to do that, right? So there's 5,700 of the military down here. You have frontline border agents, and you have people being repositioned from El Paso over here to the San Diego sector. The concern is some are going to rush the border, where the lanes of traffic, 28 lanes of traffic going north. So they closed some of that yesterday. Also, they could do it legally. Put their name on a list. But we talked to a social worker earlier today. She said a lot of people here are misinformed.
Yes, they're fleeing, political conflict. Yes, they're fleeing persecution, and they're in all their right to seek asylum. Now, how? And who's going to help them? And who's going to guide them to do it the proper way? That's the one thing that I do want to ask people.
So yesterday, you see some video there of maybe a dozen immigrants or something less climbing this fence. And it can be done. It's not easy, and I'm not even going to try, but you can do it this way. Some of the young guys can do it, and they'll go to the fence there, and they'll goad or tease the Border Patrol. There's not really imminent threat here. These bollards are filled with cement. They can't do anything here. The concern, as I said, is those lanes of traffic, which is much harder to police. Now, You know, when you go east of here, and you know this because you've lived on the border fence is really nothing but that old landing mat, the steel landing mat. Well, on the U.S. side, it looks like it's 8 feet tall, but the Mexicans have built it up and put a lot of soil here, and it's easy, like 3 feet in some spots. So over this week, the Border Patrol and the military was trying to harden that infrastructure and to raise it up, put some razor wire on the other side of that in those places that are vulnerable, Harris. So at this point in time, we're expecting ultimately about 5,000 from the main caravan and potentially 3,000 other caravan members ultimately hitting Tijuana. And then what happens next? Well, it could be a real bad and messy situation here for a long time.
Yeah.
Back to you.
You're right. I have lived down there, so I'm familiar with what those porous places look like. William Lajeunesse, thank you very much. Going to bring in now Brandon Judd, National Border Patrol Council President, right on time. It's great to have you on the program today. So you no doubt have seen the video, and you're talking to your people. Who's coming across the border majorly?
The majority of the people that are coming across the border are family units, but we still get those single male adults. We still get people from special interest countries. It's not just what everybody thinks. We get people that we have to be very concerned about, and so we take this situation very seriously.
Now, when you say people you have to be concerned about, what do you mean by that?
Well, what we have to do is we have to look into their backgrounds. When we take them into custody, we have to take them back to our stations, and we have to look into their backgrounds to find out if they have any criminal records here in the United States. For instance, a couple months ago, we arrested a group of individuals that crossed the border illegally in the Rio Grande Valley. When we took that group back to the Border Patrol station and we ran records checks on them, there was one that was with his 8-year-old daughter, and he had a conviction here in the United States for rape. And so we have to take every single person that crosses the border. We have to take them very seriously, and we have to look into what are they coming for? Are they coming here for nefarious purposes? Are they just seeking asylum? You know, what is the purpose? But we have the right to know who's coming into the United States, and we have the right to process them properly.
Brandon, how will we get that done, that personal vetting of each individual, when, as you just heard William Lajeunesse report, that 5,000 from that main original caravan now are getting to the U.S. border much quicker with rides and help along the way?
Harris, it's nearly impossible to do it. The problem that we face is when we take these individuals into custody and they ask for asylum, we end up releasing them on what's called their own recognizance, expecting them to show up to a future court date. The problem is the vast majority of them never show up to their court dates. They disappear into what President Obama. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt for one second, because there's conflict around the number or the percentage of these people that actually end up going to court and those who kind of fold into society, as you're talking about. Why can't we agree on that? Isn't there like a hard number?
There is a hard number. In fact, I mean, if you look at the former acting ICE director, Tom Homan, he saw those numbers. He knows exactly what those numbers are. And I believe that he says that those numbers are somewhere around 20% that actually show up. I mean, we do have those hard numbers. We know how many show up, but we know that the vast majority do not. And if they don't show up, what they're telling you is that they did not have a legitimate asylum claim in the first place. And that's the concern that we have. They're gaming the system, and Congress has to step up and fix this problem.
Wow. Well, they have begun arriving. And for all the critics who said, oh, no, that's not going to happen, they're weeks and weeks away, the timetable for some, the vast majority still coming, but for some has been sped up. Brandon Judd, National Border Patrol Council President, I appreciate you being here. We'll bring you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Facebook is now firing back after a blistering New York Times expose alleges the company knew about Russian interference before it said so publicly. For a while, among some other big claims. A live report. Keep watching. Social media giant tried to deflect blame and mask problems as they dealt with growing controversies, including Russia's influence campaign during the 2016 election. Now, Facebook's leaders are hitting back and a point-by-point rebuttal. Fox Business Network's Christina Partsinevelos is with me now. what is happening with Facebook?
This is a bombshell report, literally saying that they're deflecting the blame around, like you said, the Russian interference in the elections in 2016, abusive content, as well as data privacy. The report was very long, but one line that I want to focus on is the fact that they said, and I quote, that Facebook's power could be used to exploit, disrupt elections, broadcast viral propaganda, and inspire deadly campaigns of hate around the globe. It goes on to say that Zuckerberg and Mrs. Sandberg, who's the CEO, did stumble, and that the pair ignored warning signs and then sought to conceal them from the public. So more specifically, what are the takeaways? Facebook, according to this report, knew about the Russian interference in spring 2016, but waited a year to tell the public. The second major takeaway, too, is that Facebook, the employees, and Mr. Zuckerberg himself were offended by a post by then presidential candidate Trump on banning Muslim immigrants. The board and all the C-suite executives talked about it and said, no, we can't delete that because we will face a backlash among Republicans. The third major takeaway with this report is that Facebook launched a lobbying campaign overseen by Sheryl Sandberg, who is the CEO. She's also the author of Lean In, to shift anger to other tech firms and essentially cast the blame on, let's say, Google and other big tech firms away from them. They hired a firm called Definers. They're a Republican PR firm. And what they did is they casted the blame and encouraged journalists to link liberal donor George Soros as a force behind the anti-Facebook movement. They put out reports about Google and Apple for unsavory business practices. So since then, Facebook has responded. They've poked some holes in the article, but they haven't completely gone against everything there. Facebook has said, we've acknowledged publicly on many occasions, including before Congress, that we were too slow to spot Russian interference on Facebook, as well as other misuse. But then they continue to go on saying that they spent a lot of money over the last 2 years trying to change things around. Nonetheless, the company has come forward today saying that they have fired the Facebook PR firm Definers, saying that right now the connection is too obvious and they don't want to be involved with it. The stock plummeted yesterday. This is just a continuing story with Facebook.
All right. Christina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We want to get right now to what's happening inside the White House. The president delivering remarks supporting veterans and military families through Partnership Conference. We knew that this was coming today. He was at the Marine Barracks, some of the oldest buildings in Washington, D.C. He and the First Lady toured today. Again, an entire day of supporting veterans and their families, in addition to the announcement of an enumeration from the $73 billion in funding that he brought the VA. Stay with us. More to come.
Be joined by Secretary of Labor Alex
from the Florida recount deadline. So what happens next? We're live in the Sunshine State. Plus, can self-proclaimed master legislator and astute leader Nancy Pelosi convince enough Democrats to make her Speaker of the House again? Karl Rove asking that question in his latest column, and he'll join me to explain why it might not be so easy. And Senator Mike Lee says Congress has a rare opportunity for real criminal justice reform. We'll ask him how he plans to do this on the Daily Briefing.
All right, so we are inching our way closer to the Florida recount deadline. We already know that Palm Beach County may not make it. We know that from our own reporting this hour. But Broward County, the controversial Broward County, is looking like they will make the deadline. Hal Lambert, creator of the MAGA Fund. Doug Schoen, Democratic pollster in many of the Clinton years.
Many. Yes.
Great to see you both.
Great.
Hal, I want to start with you. You had a word during the commercial break to describe what's happening in Florida. What is it?
Embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Broward County and Palm Beach have learned nothing in 20 years. We're having to do the same thing that happened in 2000. We're back to attorneys suing each side. There's disenchantment in the campaigns, and now we're going to have an election that the results are done. I mean, DeSantis is going to be governor, and Scott's going to be the senator. But now they're going to come back and say, oh, they were delegitimate. They're not legitimately elected, just like they did with Bush in 2000. We spent a year of people saying Bush wasn't our president. Now they're going to do that with DeSantis and Scott, and it's unfortunate.
You know, what's interesting about what Hal is saying is that this does have a residual effect. This doesn't just stop at Thanksgiving or Christmas. This goes on for the better part of however long the questions of legitimacy last.
Harris, I wish I could disagree with you. I wish I could sit here as a Democrat and say, no, Gilliam's going to win, no, Nelson's going to be reelected, and everybody is going to...
Well, I know you wish your side would win.
I wish, but you know what? I have to say that I think Hal is right that we're going to have 2 Republicans as senator and governor. But the larger issue is what you raise. We are delegitimizing, as Hal suggested, our elected officials, our political process, weakening our country and making America not great again, but weaker, more divided, more polarized.
So how do we fix it?
Well, you've got to fix the election process in Broward County, for one thing. I mean, the people that are running that need to be replaced, obviously. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you know, this is embarrassing to Florida, but it's embarrassing to the country.
Exactly.
It's embarrassing to the country. We have the rest of the world looking out and going, what kind of, is this a banana republic going on in Florida?
Yeah, you know, look at what happened. We heard from Vermont today, and it took them a while to count. We heard from Arizona. It took them a while to count. No matter which side wins in this, right. It seems like these other states are capable of getting it right. 65 of 67 counties in Florida didn't have a problem.
Right, and I think...
So are there shenanigans? What's happening?
I think there is rank incompetence, potentially...
Is there money in being incompetent? I'm just wondering what drives it.
Let's put it this way. There is no penalty in being incompetent, say what we're talking about, which is the loss that Florida and the United States and in our whole country faces as a result of the fact we can't even count our votes and elect our officials.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for being here. We'll bring you back.
Thank you.
Stay close.